Back in January of 2023, I had the incredible opportunity to sit down with Noel Paul Stookey, one-third of the iconic American folk group Peter, Paul, and Mary. I'd been interested in talking to Noel for some time for his small but noteworthy contribution to the history of the Warner Brothers cartoons during the waning years of the golden age of animation. From 1967 to 1969, Warner Brothers had briefly reopened their in-house animation department after merging with film production company 7 Arts, following years of having outsourced cartoon production to Patty Freeling Enterprises. In 1968, during the middle of this short-lived period, an experimental cartoon special entitled Norman Normal was released, directed by Alex Lovey and produced by William Hendricks, in addition to Noel himself. Perhaps the most distinct and creatively inspired of any of the shorts released during this time, it was based on the Peter, Paul, and Mary song of the same name and portrayed the song's protagonist, Norman, in visual form, musing and philosophizing his way through various doors in his head, windows to parts of his daily life. Noel provided not only the song and his creative input, but also provided the voices of nearly every supporting character, including Norman's boss and the bartender during the party vignette.
I can do it, boss. Just give me a chance.
Very well, Norman. Bring the signed contract to me first thing in the morning. That'll be all.
Yes, sir.
What's the matter, Norm? Can't you hold your liquor?
What?
You scared of bull drink?
No, I think I'll just have a little ginger ale.
It's a party, Norm. Come on, loosen up. Have fun.
I'm pretty loose already.
The cartoon is truly unique in its collaborative spirit between music and animation, and I wanted to learn all I could from Noel about how the short came to be, his role in its production, and his experience throughout. Noel was incredibly gracious with his time, and the proceeding is the 1-hour chat in which Noel reflects on Norman Normal more than 50 years after its release.
Familiar, but in a most unusual way. He's a Norman Normal. I said he's Norman Normal.
Hey, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
All right, great.
Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule. I really appreciate it. This is an honor.
Oh, not a problem. It's early morning. Well, reasonably early morning, and I have an entire day in front of me. And part of it, as you may be able to tell, is going to take place on a driving range.
Oh wow!
So where are you located?
I'm at Butler University in Indianapolis. If you've heard of it, actually.
Oh, sure.
I'm in Chicago back when I'm not at school, but it's about a 3.5-hour drive, close by. It's a great communications school. That's really why I'm here. So.
Great, good. And that's what you intend to do in term. You're pretty broad in your approach to communication.
Well, I'm studying creative media and entertainment. That's like my discipline. It's part of Butler's communications program. It is a pretty broad field. So I've gotten a lot of experience in like digital and creative marketing, advertising. I also do a lot of digital illustration. So I'm actually the comic strip artist for the university's newspaper, which is really, really a lot of fun.
That's cool.
So as you can imagine, I take a lot of interest in art and animation and things like that.
I was a cartoonist for my high school paper.
No kidding. That's great.
Yeah. At my age, you start looking back at the possibilities of all of your steps, not necessarily being in a straight line, nor that you had awareness of the steps you were taking. To end up with arguably some of the most politically aligned and concerned musicians of the 20th century. I look back now at the cartoon that I just thought of it because I was drawing caricatures of the principal and the vice principal and calling and giving them evil names like Sniffles and
oh my gosh.
I know. And I'm thinking, right. So
Did they take humor and all that? They probably looked at it, obviously.
I think they probably did, but they said, that was an era when older folks would say, kids can be kids. Kids are just kids. Unlike the 6-year-old with the gun who shot his teacher. My God,
Wow.
What the world has allowed, come to. And impossible to control. I mean, the land of the free. We're going to have
Absolutely.
to, if it weren't for love, and that's where I finally came down about 40 years ago, this would be a horrendous experience.
Sure.
Um,
Luckily, there's a
because
lot of it, to go
I,
around. Luckily.
yeah, I hope so. I hope everybody picks up on the fact that it's bigger than just me and you.
Sure.
Uh, yeah, but to the task at hand, I'm. It's very cool that you picked up on Norman Normal. It's kind of an underground thing. I don't think anybody was making cartoons or animation like that uh, at that point. Social commentary, but it came at a particularly turning point in my life. I don't know if you know a song called "The House Song" that the trio did, probably in either an album after or an album before Norman Normal. But it
Interesting.
was it was an awareness that metaphor could really move people. That it was less about specifics in terms of details, but more about general awareness.
Okay.
And uh, so Norman Normal came with a host of people who lingered on. Jim Mason, in particular, who I co-wrote "I Dig Rock and Roll Music" with,
Mm-hmm.
was part of a crowd along with Dave Dixon. They spelled Dave Dixon's name wrong in the cartoon.
Paul
Called him
Dixon?
Paul Dixon.
Is that not
Exactly.
correct? Interesting. I had no idea.
Yeah, it
Wow.
was Dave Dixon, and I had gone to high school with him, as well as gone to high school with my wife now of some 59 years. Yeah. Um, and he was always a surly, cynical guy who talked about the shredded beef sandwiches, at school assemblies, and the kids loved him, but you know, the people who were in charge always thought of him reluctantly. He became, if you look it up or are interested at all, because Dave and I grew up in the Midwest. I mean, that was Birmingham, Michigan, and
Sure.
in the Detroit area. And Dave became one of the most popular disc jockeys in that area in the early 60s. And then he moved to New York, where we collaborated on a ton of stuff, including Norman Normal. His voice for Norman I,
Ah, right.
is so beautifully and perfectly underplayed. I mean, he is quintessential the anti-hero.
I'm not gonna do it. I'll go in his office and I'll say, look here, BB, either we've got a good ball bearing or we haven't. You don't buy favors with alcohol. I wanted to say that basically a psychiatrist is sort of a father image. Not that my father would even listen, I mean, he was always busy or something. And even though he doesn't say anything to help, like go wash your hands or ask your mother, he's still your dad. And if he isn't there to answer stuff like, what's right and wrong, Dad? I mean, I know what's right and wrong, but everybody seems to have their own kind.
I agree.
Very straight. And I did all the other voices. I did the,
Yeah.
I did the boss. I did the guys at the party. I did,
I was
Norm. Yeah.
Oh yeah, well, if you want you were just about to do the voice real quick.
No. Just one of the guy, I think. Uh, Congratulations on the fan show count. That was the drunk hanging him all over and telling an intemperate, racist joke about the Inuit. Uh,
Listen, did you hear this one about the traveling salesman and the Eskimo?
No.
Well, he's this traveling salesman. So he stops up north at the North Pole, and he's standing around his igloo.
Listen,
staring at all these Eskimos.
I don't want to interrupt your story, but
And it's smutty,
is this a
and
joke you're
it's
going to tell me about a
blue
minority
and
group?
obscene and
And
bad
then
taste
after you tell it, we're all going to laugh and feel superior?
ethnic origin stuff. And so just before the icicle breaks, he screams out, "That was no walrus, that was your wife!"
yeah, and the bartender. You
Yeah.
don't like it when a real personality comes out, do you? They attempted to resurrect it a couple of times, or resurrect the concept a couple of times, but
Sure.
it never went anywhere.
But I was just gonna ask what that recording process was like, giving voice to those supporting characters from the film?
Well, it was the beginning of multitrack. So being able to, play off of a previously recorded sound was helpful. It also meant that I could create the soundtrack. That entire band was all voice, and to be able to do that multi-track, I wouldn't have been able to do that, obviously. I could do it maybe tape on top of tape on top of tape,
Right.
recording that way. But this was done multi-track. It was a upscale, a legit studio where I don't recall if Peter, Mary, and I ever recorded music in it, but it was set up, as a music recording. And I think the engineer that I pulled into it was one of the engineers that did Peter, Paul, and Mary sessions.
And this
And
was
it
at
was just
the Warner studio where you did the dialogue?
no. In New York City. We were an East Coast group.
Gotcha. Okay, so you brought everything to them, essentially.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Just shipped it to them. Yeah. Actually, just shipped them the soundtrack, and they assembled the video. I was never part of any of the video presentation. I mean, I think they sent me some caricatures of Norman and maybe his boss, but the whole concept, the whole way that it was pulled together, that was all very clever Warner Brothers. The grandfather, don't make waves, Norman, where he fades into the wallpaper.
Success. That's the main thing. Learning to fit in. Don't make waves, Norman. Fit in. Learn to fit in, Norman.
The stubble on the bosses, slide it under his nose and get him to sign. I mean, the kind of the subtle sleaziness of the boss. That was really, they were very, very, very clever. And they had to draw Norman with that kind of odd shaped skull, because to do the artful brushwork of Milt Glazer would have just been very difficult in that era.
Milt Glazer, if that is how to pronounce it, his original design for Norman Normal. I was wondering exactly how the two, obviously you told me that the design in the final cartoon differs greatly from his original pitch. Yeah. And I was wondering if you could tell me more about that.
Somewhere in my basement, because I'm not at home now, I'm on the West Coast, are two sketches, one of which is Norman and a dog.
That's right.
And I don't remember what the second sketch is, but it's beautiful. And it's Glazer, even though it was spelled with an S, not a Z. But yeah, Milt Glazer and the Pushpin Studios. They did all the Peter, Paul, and Mary stuff certainly in the '60s, and then some when we got back together again.
Sure. Can you almost like describe in a sense what his original design for Norman looked like and how that was like adapted and kind of felt around? Or
I can't do it justice, honestly. Just know that it was watercolor, that whatever kind of edges existed and it was a full-length drawing of Norman standing with his dog.
Sure.
It was like Jimmy Stewart as the actor, as opposed to Al Capone. The edginess, but it's okay. I don't know. Somehow it still worked. Okay. It's just that Norman wasn't perhaps quite as sensitive, rendered quite as sensitively as Milt had. Well, I've got somebody at home who is doing some archival work for me. Let me turn them on to the possibility of finding the original Glazer rendering.
That would be incredible.
Of Norman. Yeah, I now that I think of it, it was like an 11 by 14 or a 14 by 17, quite a large drawing. I would like to have it framed for that. Yeah, I'm I'll write down the reminder to myself. Thank you.
You said he had a dog too. I don't think that made it into the
Yeah,
finished cartoon.
that didn't make it into it. No, well, it would have complicated all the issues.
Sure.
Yeah.
Um,
All right.
but yeah, thank you so much. That would be incredible. I would love to see that.
So would I.
As far as the song goes that the short was based on, Norman
Oh
Normal,
yeah.
I understand that was part of an album that was released a year or two prior to the cartoon, and I had done some YouTube searching on the cartoon, and I believe I ran across a comment of yours that might have been from a few years ago, because I believe it was the same account tied to the same account we were emailing on. But you spoke about the fact that the idea for Norman Normal was due to some tours that you were doing in Australia. There were some bus
Yeah,
benches or something like that. I was wondering if you could talk a
that's
little bit
right.
about it.
I have no idea what it was about, though. I could probably. I do have a friend in Australia that I could put you in touch with. He would love it if you contacted him separately. His name is Warren Barnett, and I will send you his email. But he's a font of all things Peter, Paul, and Mary. But he and I particularly hit it off because I worked with a friend of his, Gary Shearston, who was a Aussie folk singer.
Sure.
And he will remember that period of time when the benches at the bus stops in Melbourne or Sydney had Norman Normal signs on them. And the name just struck me, as it would strike any thinking person. You look around you and you say, okay, what is normal? What's the baseline here for normality? And that just yeah, the concept just tickled my fancy. I just kept saying to myself, okay, well then I got to write a song about Norman Normal. And the fact that it became a cartoon, I think, was in part because of uh, evenings with Dave Dixon and Jim Mason, the creative crowd that I hung out with.
Sure.
But I'll try to. Warren may know where Norman Normal came from, and I think there was a story. I mean, obviously, another story than mine behind the creation of that name. With some success, I just wanted to put normal on. I wanted to test the concept of normal with the viewer and the listener. In other words, although not in the music, you don't. I mean, all I was trying to do was equate Norman with the listener. In that case, there's someone you've got to meet him, and though you see him every day, and the idea was you look in a mirror and there's Norman Normal. You are normal. You are Norman. But in the cartoon, in the layout of the script for the cartoon, the idea was to put him in situations that required a judgment, and I was trying to establish a baseline of conscience for normality.
Absolutely.
And I wasn't always successful. I mean, I was in the case of Norman, but the idea was he didn't come off as a prude, but there were things that were happening all around him that could have pushed him into making other decisions, but he didn't. And to a large extent, he was not guided by his father, or in this instance. And I would review that in terms of my own relationship with my father, because my dad was great, but he did manage the family by example rather than by dictate. And to that extent, I'm a lot healthier for it because, the law didn't come down from above with no justification. It was lived by my dad and by my mom. I'm a very lucky guy. I was an only child and was allowed an immense amount of creative freedom. To the point of I was having circuses at the age of 6, with a cat underneath an orange crate pulled on a wagon, parading through town. Uh,
My gosh.
yeah, it was, yeah, yeah.
That's lovely. Would
Of
you?
course, I did get criticized, and you'll get a kick out of this because I'll bet you did it too. I did get criticized, chastened by my mom when she discovered that I had drawn animated figures on the pages of book in her library. You could flip the animated. That's how I
No,
first
I
found out animation.
exactly the same thing actually. And so, do you see a lot of yourself in Norman in that aspect, his character?
I think so. Yeah, even though it was Dave Dixon that voiced him.
Sure.
Yeah, in the script, I just tried to create a steady line. Uh, and although the creatives are generally viewed as those folks who have no moral compass or have you know, no direction to their lives. They just respond to life around them. I find myself pretty, I, in my mind anyway, I refer to myself as a pretty normal guy who raised 3 wonderful daughters and have I don't know, maybe it's a little apprehension or maybe it's just wisdom that pulls one back from total commitment to fame and fortune. There are choices that those of us in the public eye are continually given as to how much indulgence we're going to allow or interference in our private lives. An entreaty like yours, which is very human, becomes much more appealing to me than a magazine interview or you know. And I've had them both. I much prefer this.
I definitely feel that, there is that creative stigma of people not having like oh, the creatives are like the strange types, or you can't put like a pin on them, and that things are always going to be different between the creative types and then like the average people of society. But I find that there's always going to be a lot of characteristics that unite every human being, and so I think that's
Yeah, and I
important as
think
well.
most people are much more creative than they realize. You know, that's part
Absolutely.
of what you and I, part of our obligation as artists is to bring out the artist in the people that we meet.
Oh, sure. No,
Yeah.
and I think you artistically like represented um, the way a lot of people think. I love the visual of how Norman's head, the way that he goes about life, is he the different things that the everyday the different circumstances he finds himself in are just like little doors in his mind. One door,
Uh,
little hang-ups on his mind, right? He's got the one door that leads to like his strange relationship with his boss, wanting to prove himself but also wanting to stick to his morals. And then
right,
his relationship with
right.
his dad is another door, and then with his peers is another one. I think it's a great way
Now
to
that was
visualize that.
now that was a Warner's representation. I mean, I'm telling you, those guys were really clever. That whole scene where the camera pulls back above
Oh,
and we
that's
watch
great.
Norman rotate
That's
around
my favorite scene in the whole cartoon.
that's Warner Brothers. I mean, that was not written in the script. Uh, those scenes, yeah, was pretty remarkable.
How did the idea come about that after the song was finished and everything, you figured it might be a good idea for a cartoon? How was that initially like? I know you and Dave Dixon probably spoke a lot about it, but how was that initially like proposed that, hey, we should make this into a cartoon short?
I think it began as a floating word idea. Um, I think the song was so odd, just as I was captured by the Norman Normal on the back of the bus bench. I think the song Norman Normal opened up some doors conceptually for how it would take another step. Where how would Norman Normal manifest itself? Would it be another song, or would it be a cartoon? And I think the fact that our next door neighbor in Rye, New York, Joe Kotler, was, I think he was head of the New York division of Warner's publishing. Anyway, he set up a meeting with somebody in an office, and I said, well, why don't, I'd like to make a cartoon. I had no idea what the cartoon would be about. And then Dixon and I just sat down and parsed it out. The circumstances and I don't think it was, honestly, I don't think it was until we got into the studio that I realized that Dave was the perfect Norman Normal voice.
He is. He's a great performance. It's very notable. His voice is very distinct.
And very flat, very unencumbered.
Very
expressionless.
everyman. Yeah.
The crossover ability of musical artists hadn't really been explored yet. I mean, this is
Sure.
prior to Barbara Streisand becoming a movie star, or or vice versa. I'm not sure it works the other way. People who are movie stars who end up being singers. Although, maybe I'm just not thinking of them. But that cross-pollination between the aspects of the arts, I don't think was really, they were looking for ways to maximize any contractual artist. And so I think Warner said, oh, hey, this group is hot. Peter, Paul, and Mary are doing top 10 records. Let's utilize that fame and create a animated portrayal and see how it works at the box office.
Sure. No,
I think it was nominated for an Academy Award, but I don't remember whether it was or not.
I know Alex Lovey directed the animation, and William L. Hendricks was the producer. At any point during production, did you ever have a chance to get in touch with them or talk to them about anything?
No, I think maybe Hendricks was East Coast.
Okay.
And I think he was maybe the person that Joe Kotler introduced me to. But I really had no contact with him. I just turned in the soundtrack and off they went.
Gotcha. And to that same end, when you were recording those voices, you didn't have any concept of what those characters were going to look like in terms of
Nope.
the ones that you recorded.
That's right.
Interesting.
That's right. Yeah, I thought they did a great job.
Me as well. And then in that same vein, I guess William Lava, he was all Warner's. He did the incidental music and stuff throughout.
Yeah, that was curious.
Interesting. Go on about that. What do you mean?
Oh, I mean, that was to come to see the cartoon for the first time and realize that there were stingers in there that were not created by voice,
Sure.
This was theatrical little pieces.
What did you think of his additions in terms of score to the cartoon?
I think it was good. They were they did what they were supposed to do. They made transitions, and the sound effects. The squeaky doors, in and out,
Right in here, that's what the cartoon's all about.
The chatter. I think Dixon and I did the chatter at the party. Once again, multi-track, allowed us to do that. Just the mumble, the mumble in the background.
Well, the original song is some of that too, at the beginning and the end. They
Really?
have the chatter and the conversation, from what I know.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Right
Yeah,
before the music or your acapella starts, there's like it sounds like they're at a party and there's like little
that's
ice.
right. Wow, I'll have to go listen to that again, man. I forgot all about that. I think there's some local comments that are made too. I mean, that refer to people that Dave Dixon and I knew in high school.
I hear like there's someone I try to like parse it apart when I can because I think it's interesting. Someone mentions like Professor Lannon or something like that or Professor so
Oh,
and so.
Lester. No,
Lester.
Lester Lannon.
Lester
That was a,
Lannon.
yeah, it was a very upscale, um, how should I say, dance band leader, like Guy Lombardo, or except that he was at that time, in the '60s, he was the go-to guy if you were having a debutante party and you wanted a band to play.
Hmm.
But I have no idea why I used his name. But yeah, Lester Lannon. Wow.
That's great. Obviously, Norman Normal, when it was released in 1968, um, it was released as a cartoon special, so not a Merry Melodies or a Looney Tune short. And I think it was the only one of the studio's productions to ever release that way as like a cartoon special. And then the animation department for Warner's closed in 1969, which was a year after uh,
Uh,
Norman came out because I think the Kinney National Company they bought out Warner's and they decided to close their animation wing, focus more on television. Um, so I think it's a very fascinating point in history, the fact that you managed to almost be a part of that tail end of the theatrical golden age animation. And obviously at that time they were trying to like what you were talking about with hiring on artists that were part of their catalog, definitely trying to like experiment with new ideas to see what could be a hit at the box office. Um,
yeah. Gee, I had no, that's really interesting chronologically. I had no idea
yeah.
that Warner's closed down right after the next year. Huh.
Did you ever have any
Yes.
semblance that you were working? I'm not sure how much you were aware of at the time, like, like Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Chuck Jones, the great directors, animators. Did you ever have any semblance that you were like working with the same studio that had created all of those animated classics in the past or anything like that?
No, I was probably aware of the fact that I, was following Mel Blanc,
Absolutely.
you know, uh, because I was fascinated by his ability to do so many different voices.
Oh, sure.
Well, how do you tell me a little bit about how what system you use to get to graphics? I mean, I'm, cell animation is ancient history now, I'm sure, and tweening,
Hmm.
is probably, well, it's AI, isn't it? You know, take this image and put it over here.
Well, definitely a lot of computer assisted work, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
Celluloid, yeah, not a practice that's really done in animation anymore ever since the late 20th century. When I'm doing my own work, and what's great is that a lot of students of animation are getting access to those same tools now that are being used in
yeah,
industry productions. Like for 2D stuff, there are a lot of programs like Toon Boom, Harmony is something that I've used a
yeah.
lot in the past. You have your Adobe suite with Adobe Animate and Adobe Flash and things like that.
Wow.
You've got Clip Studio Paint, various different softwares. What some people will do is that they will do the sketches on paper, and then they will scan them into the computer, and that's how the digital coloring and ink is done. So you only have to, your paperwork is essentially just the line sketches, and then you scan that in, and you can digitally create the line work and the inks, and use the paint tool to essentially fill in all your colors.
And will it, after it learns that first rendering, can it then automatically do the rest of them no matter what position that the objects are in?
To a point, I would say. I still think that there is a lot of human interaction. I don't think animation could be done reliably without
Uh,
lots of
yeah,
human interference. Um,
right.
I think what
Interference. Wait a minute. Inspiration. We don't call it interference. Hold on. It's a little cold in the garage here.
No problem. Oh, that's where you're at. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. But sure, yeah, no, inspiration, not interference. What machines and computers are great for is kind of learning what the palettes are for the characters. So let's say, like if you were doing, like a digital version of the Norman Normal cartoon, you could input what his color palettes are. And then for every frame of animation, you could just superimpose that palette onto his characters, so you wouldn't need to hand select and hand paint every single frame of him doing his thing. Some productions are done all digitally now, so even the storyboards and initial sketches are done via the computer. I have my art tablet right here. It's a Huion canvas.
I have one of those as well.
Yeah.
I have it. It's just still in the box. I'm scared to bring it out.
It's not as scary as you think, I promise you.
Okay.
But it's
Do you use it for animation, or you just use it for ideas?
both. I will open
Really?
some days I'll just open up a notepad and just start drawing whatever comes to mind, completely non-committal. And then I have, it acts as a second monitor between my computer. And so I can open up Toon Boom, my animation suite, for example, and I can just get going right on here with all the settings and features that I need. And then that goes directly into the computer, and I can save my progress, turn it in.
Wow.
So it's a very streamlined process, actually. But I still have a sketch paper full of physical sketches and stuff as well that I will.
Right.
It's a lot more authentic, I would say, just getting my ideas down on paper.
Yes. Yeah. Well, thanks for the encouragement. I would love to get to know that tablet. My grandson is a combination artist and computer nerd. He hasn't made up his mind where he's going to drift to. He probably will do both. But then, he picked up a guitar the other day too, and he's learning to play that. So you can't keep these 21-year-olders.
When you saw that cartoon released, when it first came back to you, did you have any grasp on what the reaction was when that cartoon came out, or what people thought of it? Norman Normal?
There must have been something else going on in my life. To a large extent, I have to say that 150 to 200 concerts a year,
right,
plus related press and recording, and the travel to work in France, Japan, Australia, and the continental United States is distracting.
I can imagine. Yeah.
And I'm so fortunate to have kept my marriage alive and during that period of time, and to have been a father to a woman who's just doing amazing work now in an organization called Music to Life. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's supporting socially conscious, socially aware artists, musical artists in a lot of different genres.
That's great. Wow.
Who are not just doing rubber chicken dinners to raise money for the particular benefit, but they actually go, they're in the prisons singing. They're putting their mouth where their music is. They're putting their body where their music leads them. So that's a long way of saying that I had a lot of there was a lot going on in my life in 1968. So when the cartoon came out, it was, oh yeah, okay, great, wonderful, glad it's out there. Hope you enjoy it. Next.
Sure. No, I've got to remind myself to think about the Paul Stookey point of view as of, a major performing artist.
And singer-songwriter too. I'm discovering that how much of myself I really poured into songwriting. There's an expression from literature It says, "Tell it on the slant," which is to paraphrase, is kind of the recognition that metaphor can have a very strong impact. It's basically what art is, the interpretation, but leaving it wide enough to be accessible. Um, in one case, you want to be true to your calling. On the other hand, you want to invite people into the calling. If if you have an agenda, uh, I understand that there's like just throw shit on a wall agenda, which is in terms of its action, is a statement. But then there's also the thoughtful recognition that you have an opportunity to engage somebody else in a meaningful uh, exchange. Um, so those two different kinds of arts seem to surface in each of us as creators. And I
Absolutely.
don't know how I got there, and I'm not going to come back.
That's wonderful. That's a great perspective. I guess in terms of further artistic creation, because you were, you just talked about it was like, oh, great, the cartoon's out, on to the next thing. Were there ever plans to do anything more with the either the Norman Normal song as a concept, or the Norman Normal character, or the cartoon series? Did you have any follow up ideas regarding that?
No, actually, I moved with Dave Dixon, who by that time had returned from New York to, or still had connections in Birmingham, Michigan. I returned with Dave to Birmingham, Michigan, and hired a warehouse to create a film called The Culvert, which
Interesting.
was a story, a brief film about a soldier who, during a retreat, crawled into a culvert to escape the mortar shelling of the retreating troops, and then was overtaken by the enemy, who never looked into the culvert. So we hear them talking outside of the culvert, and we see him preparing to try to leave the culvert, or, you know, but when he crawled in, he didn't realize that the rifle that he had brought in was too large to turn around inside the diameter of the culvert. So there's a whole thing. Yeah. So, but I got it, yes, I was still into movies, and yeah, to a certain extent, it was Everyman again.
Sure.
Here's the soldier, in a sense, reflecting who we would be were we in the same circumstance.
Absolutely, and that was coming on right in, right at the crux of Vietnam as well. So I'd imagine
That's true.
that
It
had some
was.
influence.
Yeah. Yeah. The anti-war. Yeah, and it got shown once or twice, I think. We didn't run Norman Powell as the cartoon accompaniment, but
Sure.
because you remember, oh no, you don't remember. But in the old days, there was the newsreel, the cartoon,
Yep.
and the feature,
Sure.
and that's the way it played out.
And I'm so jealous of that period in time. I would love to
Mm,
go to the movies and pay to see more than just the feature film. I would love to.
yeah, yeah. And then if you went to the really big theaters in downtown Detroit, sometimes you got a stage show
Oh
as
my
well.
gosh. Wow.
And then Radio City Music Hall, the organ would come out of the sidewall, and the guy would play just, I mean, it was a massive organ at Radio City Music Hall. I saw Chitty Chitty Bang Bang there. Yeah,
Wow.
Chitty Bang Bang was such a long film at the time that they had an intermission between the
Interesting.
two halves of it, and the organ came out of the wall at intermission time and played for the audience.
That's
Huh.
amazing. Wow. I also heard there were talks. I found a piece of concept art, I believe, for it online somewhere. It was a Warner Brothers 7 Arts piece of concept art, and it depicted what appeared to be, it was just a single drawing and a text blur, but there were plans to do, I think it was a Puff the Magic Dragon theatrical short, from around that same time, and I was obviously I don't think that ended up but materializing. Do you have
Oh, it
like
did.
any?
Oh, it did. There were at least two, if not three, Puff the Magic Dragon specials on TV, animated.
Interesting. I did not know that. Okay.
Yes. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Wow.
Uh, yep.
What was that like
They were beautiful.
behind that?
Actually, the I'm not sure that beautiful is quite the right word, but it was somewhere between the brevity of a Norman normal character and the expansiveness of Glazer. Uh, and Milt actually might have had something to do with Puff. Yeah, Puff went on. I mean, Puff is quite a franchise. I mean, a continuing franchise, really, to a large extent. And several books out, you know,
Sure.
Puff the Magic Dragon books. Uh, and commendably, Peter took the character of Jackie and removed the gender focus so that Jackie grew up, married, had a daughter named Jackie. A nice evolution. As I said, at least two or three different versions of the Magic Dragon.
Interesting.
Because in the beginning, I mean, certainly in the beginning, they thought that it had something to do with marijuana, which it didn't.
Right. Right.
But in the explanation of Puff and the further development of it, it was understood that Jackie grew up and didn't believe in Puff anymore, and that was the core of the song. But then when Jackie had kids, the kids believed in Puff, so Puff came back. So in many instances, Puff's return was based on belief.
And you had a hand, you were able to oversee production for most, if not all of those?
No, that'd be all Peter. That was Peter. Yeah, Peter and his college roommate. His college roommate left the first two verses of Puff the Magic Dragon rolled up in a typewriter. And Peter found those verses, added to them, and when the group became popular, set it to music, and it became, and still is, I would say, one of the 5 most notable songs that the trio ever produced, ever sang.
Sure. I think it's the one I heard first. Yeah. That's how I probably found out about
Your
it.
mommy might have sung it to you.
You know what? I'm sure she did. It's on one of my playlists now, and whenever I hear it, still touches me in the heart. It's a very touching song. Still one of my favorites.
Sweet.
This has been wonderful. This has been so great. This has given me like more context and more knowledge about this little project than I would ever have hoped for. So I really, really appreciate your time. This has been great.
That's all right. Really, the pleasure's been mine, and I thank you very much for encouraging me to pull out the tablet, whether you knew you had or not.
No,
Okay,
thank you so much. It's been great to meet
You
you.
bet. Take care of yourself, and we'll be in touch.
Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Gee, I'm sorry that things got a little confusing in there. I didn't mean for you to get all tangled up. It's just that there are so many doors in here.
But he's left them well behind. The only thing he can handle, all the hang-ups on his mind. He's
Well,
he's a no man, no more. I said he's no man, no more. He looks a lot like you.